This is the portrait of who she used to be. She was a daughter, or rather she was almost a daughter, because that was just the way things were, and she had always known what kind of cursed place she lived in, to a lesser or greater extent at different times. She knew broadly, for instance, that her own mother's grandmother had been sent to the region from a better, cleaner city in the west of the country, and years ago. This was where the story ended. This great-grandmother was dead now, and had always been dead, thick in the layers of mothers and past things. She had always been dead, but did have something to do with the other woman who lived alone and had no family to visit her on weekends, so that the almost daughter's family came instead. They had brought her bread, because that was all she asked for, along with potatoes and cheap cabbage heads and onions. The lonely woman was not dead then, but very old, and had no whole teeth at the front of her mouth. She presumably had teeth at the back of her mouth, but the almost daughter had always avoided being close enough to be able to check, as doing so caused her a vague, pulsing nausea. On the days when the lonely woman spoke too much, the almost daughter could imagine the saliva pooling and foaming in the throat the voice was coming from, and the sensation would then spread out to her own throat. The room the woman lived in smelled of bare skin and the onions. There were also days the family had come when the woman did not speak at all, or was howling, or was not even dressed. The almost daughter was aware that, like her mother's mother's mother, the old woman had also come from the city further west, and had not necessarily chosen to come. She knew that the place the woman had ended up in, or had been sent to, the place that was her own town now, had not been a proper town at the time. The schools that she and her brother attended, and also the factories, and the apartment they lived in, had somehow not existed yet. It was difficult to think a lot about this, but the only reason the buildings were now there and solid and were full of real things like noise and the lifts was that people like her mother's mother's mother, and maybe the lonely woman, had been sent and not allowed to return. These people had had to remain for so long that all the blocks and lampposts in the schools had been built and eventually had become a town. If the almost daughter sometimes did think about this, despite the difficulty and despite the fact that she generally had other things to think or not think, there really must have been a huge number of people sent from wherever else and not let back, if a whole life-size town had ended up being built. At the same time, if so many people had been sent and then had not been allowed to go back, there must have been something and someone to keep them there, and the something must have been very large and strong, and the someone must have been many people too. Then there was the question of why they had been sent, and why they were not permitted to go back, and this was where things were even harder to keep hold of. In any case, if it had been important and worth thinking so much about, surely someone would have said it all out loud by now.